This story is true. Every detail you are about to hear is documented. In church records, in physician reports, in the official letters of city councillors who witnessed it with their own eyes and could not explain what they saw, in the personal journals of priests and merchants and physicians who lived through it and spent the rest of their lives trying to understand it. It happened in Strasbourg, a prosperous city in the Alsace region of what is now northeastern France. A city of weavers and merchants and craftsmen. A city of churches and guild halls and cobblestone streets that had stood for centuries. In the summer of 1518, the summer that 400 people could not stop dancing, the summer that dancing became a death sentence, my name is Father Benedict Scholl. I was 41 years old in the summer of 1518. I had been a parish priest in Strasbourg for 11 years. I knew this city. I knew its people. I knew its rhythms and its seasons and its sorrows. I had seen plague before, the sweating sickness, the flux. I had given last rites to more people than I could count. I was not a man who frightened easily, but what happened in Strasbourg in the summer of 1518 frightened me. It frightened me from the very first morning, when I stood in the street and watched a woman named Frau Troffea dance alone on the cobblestones. Without music, without joy, without being able to stop. I kept a journal throughout that summer. Every entry dated, every observation recorded as carefully as I could manage. What I am about to tell you comes directly from those pages. I am telling you this because I was there from the very beginning. I saw the first dancer. I was present on the day the second dancer appeared, and the 5th, and the 30th. And I was there at the end, when there was almost no one left to watch. This is what happened in Strasbourg, in July of 1518. When everything we thought we understood about the human body and the human mind was proven wrong in the most terrifying way imaginable. Her name was Frau Troffea, a weaver's wife, 34 years old. She lived on a narrow street called the Rue de Boulangers with her husband Conrad and their 2 daughters. She was a respected woman, quiet, devout. She attended Mass every Sunday without fail. She was known in the neighborhood as a good neighbor, a reliable woman, a woman of steady temperament and ordinary life. On the morning of July 14th, 1518, she walked out of her front door onto the cobblestones of her street. Alone. No music playing anywhere nearby. No festival in progress. No market day. No occasion of any kind that would explain what she did next. She began to dance. Not joyfully. I want to make that absolutely clear from the beginning because it matters. I saw her myself within the first hour, and there was nothing joyful about what she was doing. Her face was set, blank. Her eyes were open, but they were seeing nothing that the rest of us could see. Her body was moving in patterns that seemed almost mechanical, rhythmic, driven, relentless, as if something inside her had been wound up like a great clock and could not find a way to wind itself down. Her arms moved, her feet moved. Her body turned and swayed and stepped in continuous motion. Not the dancing of celebration. Not the dancing of grief. Something else entirely. Something that had no name in any language I knew. People gathered around her within the first hour, as people always gather around anything unusual. They watched her from doorways and windows. Some of them laughed, assumed she was celebrating some private joy. Had perhaps taken something she should not have taken. Had perhaps gone a little mad from the summer heat. By midday, they were no longer laughing. She had been dancing for 5 hours without pause, without rest, without water. Her shoes were already wearing through. The leather thin and dark where her feet were bleeding through it. She did not seem to notice the pain. She did not seem to notice anything at all. Her husband Conrad came running when a neighbor summoned him from his workshop. He pushed through the crowd and took her by the shoulders. He said her name, loudly, urgently. He shook her. She turned her face toward him for one moment. And in that moment, I saw something in her eyes that I have never been able to forget. It was not madness. It was not joy. It was terror. The eyes of a woman who knew exactly what was happening to her. who understood that her body was no longer her own, who was screaming somewhere deep inside herself where no one could hear. Then she turned away from him and continued dancing, as if he were not there, as if none of us were there. Conrad fell to his knees on the cobblestones, put his face in his hands, and wept. I wrote in my journal that evening. I wrote this: "Today I saw something I cannot explain. A woman dances in the street and cannot stop. Her eyes speak of a soul trapped behind glass. God help her. God help us all if this is what I think it might be." I did not yet know what I thought it might be, but some part of me already knew that what I had seen that morning was not the end of something. It was the beginning. The physician who was called was a man named Dr. Hieronymus Braun, a learned man, respected throughout Strasbourg for his knowledge of the body and its workings. He arrived in the street in the late afternoon and examined Frau Troffea as carefully as he could while she continued to move. He took her pulse. He examined her eyes. He pressed his fingers to her forehead to feel for fever. He spoke to her in a calm and measured voice and received no response. He stood back, stroked his beard, thought for a long time. His recommendation was this: the dancing was caused by an imbalance of the hot blood. The remedy was not to restrain her. Restraint would worsen the imbalance. The remedy was to allow the blood to exhaust itself naturally. She should be given space to dance. She should be given music to accompany her dancing, so that the rhythm could regulate the blood and bring it back to proper balance. Looking back now across the years, I understand why he said this. Dr. Braun was frightened, and when learned men are frightened, they sometimes prescribe things that sound like medicine but are in fact simply an acknowledgement that they do not know what else to do. But that evening I stood in the street and watched two men help Frau Troffea toward the Guildhall where space had been cleared for her. And I thought, we are making a mistake. I did not yet know how terrible a mistake. That night Frau Troffea danced in the Guildhall. Musicians played for her. A small crowd watched. Some of them brought food and water which she refused or did not notice. The next morning she was still dancing, and that morning something happened that changed everything. That morning a second dancer appeared. Her name was Margarethe Klopfer. She was 18 years old, the daughter of a cloth merchant whose shop stood 2 streets from where Frau Troffea lived. A young woman I had seen at Mass many times, bright, curious, full of life in the way that only the very young can be. On the morning of July 21st, she walked out of her father's house onto the street. Alone. No music. No occasion. No explanation. And she began to dance. The same blank face. The same open, unseeing eyes. The same mechanical driven rhythm that had nothing to do with joy and everything to do with something none of us could name. I was summoned immediately by a neighbor who had seen what happened to Frau Troffea the week before and knew that something was deeply wrong. I ran to the street. I stood and looked at this young woman who I had known for years, and I felt something I had not felt since I was a young man new to the priesthood. Standing at the bedside of a dying child and suddenly understanding in my bones that there were things in this world that prayer alone could not fix. I felt afraid. Not afraid for Margarethe alone. Afraid of what it meant. One dancer is a singular madness. A woman overcome by grief or illness or some private torment that drives her body beyond its control. 2 dancers is a pattern. I wrote in my journal that night. I wrote this. 2 dancers now. This is no longer one woman's affliction. Something is moving through Strasbourg like water moves through cracks in stone. Something that finds its way into people and drives them beyond their own will. I do not know what this thing is. I do not know where it comes from. I do not know how to stop it. I do not know if it can be stopped. God help this city. Within 3 days of Margarethe's first dancing, there were 5 dancers in the streets of Strasbourg. Within a week, there were 30. Within a month, there were more than 400 people dancing in the streets and guild halls and public squares of Strasbourg, day and night, without pause, without music of their own making, without joy, without choice, some of them dancing themselves to their own deaths. I need you to understand what it looked like. 400 people dancing simultaneously in the streets of a medieval city. I need you to understand this because no description I give you will be adequate. But I will try. It did not look like celebration. It did not look like festival or carnival or any human gathering for any joyful purpose. It looked like suffering on a scale I had never imagined possible. Some of the dancers wept as they moved, tears running constantly down their faces, mouths open, eyes desperate and aware, looking at the people standing watching them with an expression of such helpless terror that many of the watchers could not bear to look back. These were the ones who were still themselves inside, still present, still understanding what was happening to their bodies, still screaming silently for someone to help them, still unable to stop. Others were gone, empty behind the eyes, blank, as if whatever had been driving them had consumed them entirely and left nothing behind but the motion. The streets of Strasbourg smelled of blood and sweat and something else. Something that I can only describe as the smell of bodies being used beyond their limits, beyond what flesh is meant to endure. The cobblestones in the areas where the dancers moved most were stained dark, some permanently. The stains were still there years later when I walked those streets, a reminder of what had happened there, of what the city had allowed to happen. City councillors met in emergency sessions almost daily. They wrote urgent letters to the Bishop of Strasbourg. They consulted every physician in the city. They sent messengers to scholars in other cities asking for explanations. The answers that came back were varying and contradictory, and none of them were adequate. Hot blood caused by summer heat, demonic possession, divine punishment for the sins of the city, mass hysteria, a curse brought by a wandering holy man who had been mistreated at the city gates. The councillors chose the explanation of hot blood because it was the only one that came with a treatment. More space for dancing, more music, professional dancers brought in to dance alongside the afflicted and guide them to recovery. I argued against this in council. I stood before the assembled councillors of Strasbourg and I told them that giving more space and more music to people who could not stop dancing was not medicine. It was encouragement. We were not treating a disease. We were feeding it. They did not listen. They built a stage in the open square. They hired 3 guilds of musicians to play in rotation day and night. They opened every guild hall in the city. And in the week that followed their decision, 40 more people began to dance. By the end of July, there were reports of dancers dying. The first death was a man named Wilhelm Strasser, a blacksmith, 40 years old, strong man. He had been dancing for 9 days when his heart gave out. He collapsed in the middle of the public square at midday. The musicians who had been playing for him stopped. The crowd that had been watching went silent. He lay on the cobblestones and did not move, and after a moment of terrible silence, the other dancers around him continued. They stepped around his body, or in some cases over it, their eyes blank or desperate depending on how far gone they were, their feet still moving, their rhythm unbroken, as if death itself was not enough to stop what was driving them. I gave Wilhelm Strasser his last rites in the square, kneeling beside his body while dancers moved around me. The musicians had resumed playing because the councillors had ordered them to play without pause. I have never felt more alone in my life than in that moment. I wrote that night. I wrote this. We are losing this city to something we do not understand and cannot fight because we refuse to name it correctly. This is not hot blood. This is not divine punishment. This is not any natural thing I have ever encountered in 40 years of life and 11 years of priesthood. This is something else. Something that has come into Strasbourg from somewhere I cannot identify. And it is killing people, one by one. And we are helping it do so. Frau Troffea was still dancing. Day 38. Her body was unrecognizable. She had lost so much weight that her clothing hung from her like rags on a scarecrow. Her feet were wrapped in cloths that needed to be changed constantly because they soaked through with blood within hours. Her husband Conrad came to me one evening as I was leaving the guild hall. He grabbed my arm. His face was the face of a man who had not slept properly in more than a month. His eyes were hollow. His hands trembled. "Father," he said, "you have to help her. Tell me what to do. Tell me how to stop it. I will do anything. I will give everything I have. I will make any sacrifice. Just tell me how to make her stop." I looked at him for a long time, and I had no answer to give him. That was the moment I understood that this was going to end in tragedy. Not for Frau Troffea alone, for all of us, for the city itself, for everyone who had watched and waited and hoped and done nothing effective to stop what was happening. I was right, but I did not yet know how completely I was right. This is episode 1 of the Dancing Plague, the true story of Strasbourg 1518, what happened to Frau Troffea in the weeks that followed, what the city finally did when the dancing would not stop, and how this terrible summer ended for the people of Strasbourg. That is a story for episode 2. Subscribe to Grey Archive Tales, and come back. We will be waiting.